frame of our hope for a newer, more exciting, more fit for purpose Parliament, that we'll be looking now at constituting a team of the House to facilitate the oversight of that. The Prime Minister will make a proper commentary on that when he presents his budget speech, but for the purpose of the House, so an advice needs to now be given that we will be formulating a committee of the House to provide the oversight for the development, construction, and so on of the new Parliament which will come. So I will be speaking with my colleague on the other side to enable that formulation before the session is ended. May it please you, Madam Speaker.
Madam Speaker, I want to thank the Leader of Government Business for the early notification, which we fully appreciate. But I think we've stopped a little short because you did indicate that the new parliamentary year will commence on the 14th. So that will be the throne speech, I take it. Are you in a position now to speak to the sitting of the Standing Finance Committee so that we can just get all of those dates in our diaries early so that we can make our planning? And I also want to share with you, Madam Speaker, welcoming back the member for Central Clarendon and to say how delighted we are that he looks fit as a fiddle and ready to go again. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker.
Madam Speaker, the request is well taken. I want to fine-tune. I have the dates, but I want to make sure that it comports with all of the...
February 1, 2023 was passed in the Senate without amendment.
Law reforms, zones of special operations, special security and community development measures. The Parade Garden Zone, extension of period of operation 2023 resolution. 7, the law reforms, zones of special operations, special security and community development measures. The Savlamar Zone, extension of period of operation 2023 resolution, which all were laid on the table on January 31, 2023. Madam Speaker, I further beg to give notice that at a later stage today, I'll move for the suspension of the standing orders to enable me to take these motions.
House Leader, there is something to be referred by the Minister of Finance. Are you doing it?
The estimates are tabled. At a later point today, we have
to give notice of it.
Madam Speaker, I will assume that responsibility.
Yes, go ahead.
On behalf of the Minister of Finance.
Go ahead.
Madam Speaker, I beg to give notice that at the next meeting of the House, I will move the following motion. Be it resolved that the Third Supplementary Estimates of Expenditure for the financial year ending March 31, 2023, which was laid on the table of the House on the 31st day of January 2023, be referred to the Public Administration and Appropriations Committee of the House of Representatives for consideration and report. Madam Speaker, I further beg to give notice that at a later stage today, I will move for the suspension of the standing orders to enable me to take this motion. May it please you, Madam Speaker.
Member from St. Andrew, Southwestern.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I beg to give notice that at the next meeting of the House, I will move the following motion. Whereas joint industrial councils provide a structured space for representatives of the Government of Jamaica, business owners, and worker representatives to discuss and come to agreement on basic terms and conditions of employment. And whereas the ruling of Justice Batts in the case of the National Housing Trust v. Marksman Limited and Robert Epstein 2022 provides an opportunity to revisit the establishment of joint industrial councils for the industry. And whereas the majority of security guards island-wide believe that their voice has not been recognized in the current discussions about their working conditions and rights. And whereas many security guards have felt disenfranchised for years, be it resolved that this Honourable House requests the relevant minister to move swiftly to re-establish the Joint Industrial Council for Industrial Security Guards, providing a structured mechanism for all stakeholders to contribute to establishing a more equitable arrangement in keeping with the laws governing workers' entitlement.
From Kingston Eastern and Port Royal.
Madam Speaker, I take it we are at questions and answers.
Questions and answers to questions.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I beg to give notice that at the end of expiration of 21 days, I will ask the Minister of Finance and Planning the following questions.
Motions that may be made at the commencement of public business requiring notice. Motions relating to sittings of the House. Motions for leave to introduce bills. Presentation of bills without leave of the House first obtained. Public business.
Madam Speaker, on the matter of public business, the Minister of National Security will now take the motions in relation to the ZOSOs, and on behalf of the Minister of Finance, Madam Speaker, I now move for the Madam Speaker, I now move for the suspension of the standing orders to enable us to take the motion, notice of which I gave earlier.
Members, the question before the House is that the standing orders be suspended to enable the House Leader, on behalf of the Minister of Finance and Public Service, to take the motion, notice of which he gave earlier. Those in favour? Those against? The ayes have it. House Leader.
He will come. Madam Speaker, I now move, be it resolved, that the third supplementary estimates of expenditure for the financial year ending March 31, 2023, which was laid on the table of the House on the 31st day of January 2023, be referred to the Public Administration and Appropriations Committee of the House of Representatives for consideration and report.
Members, you have heard the motion put by the House Leader on behalf of the Minister. Those in favour? Those against? The ayes have it.
Usually at this point, the Minister would do some opening remarks. I don't know if the House Leader will, and afford an opportunity for a response from the opposition.
House Leader.
So, Madam Speaker, I seek leave to allow for the response in terms of the comment of the Minister when he arrives to be had in order for the appropriate response from the opposition spokesman on finance. May it please you, Madam Speaker.
Members, the question therefore before the House is that the debate on the third supplementary estimates of expenditure for financial year ending March 31st, 2023, which was laid on the table today, the 31st day of January, be suspended until the arrival of the Minister of Finance for his comments. House Leader, I take it the Minister of National Security and Deputy Prime Minister may now go ahead.
Madam Speaker, that's the next item on public business. So I invite you to ask the Minister to take the measure, notice of which he gave earlier.
Minister.
Madam Speaker, I now move for the suspension of the standing orders to enable me to take the resolution, notes of which I gave earlier.
Question is that the standing orders be suspended to enable the minister to take the resolutions, notice of which he gave earlier. Those in favour? Those against? The ayes have it. Minister.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The zones of special operations remain relevant and in the current fight to restore law and order in certain communities. They are bringing about meaningful and sustainable transformation of these communities and are restoring a sense of hope for the people who reside within and around the zones. Indeed, to borrow a phrase, the zones of special ops may be the best example of what we call proximity policing. They are very demanding in both personnel, security forces, beside budget for transformation activity in the community in terms of infrastructure as well as the soft services, which have been working very well. The value proposition of the zones of special operation resides in the fact that we place equal emphasis on restoring and maintaining order and safety as well as improving the human capital and life outcomes of the residents. The people, population, are most valuable asset. All right. You allow me to speak from other than my own. Madam Speaker, the mic is careful. I'm working too well. I won't be long. The house is out to take some time. All right. But we have, indeed, Madam Speaker, I was saying this, people are our most valuable asset, and the focus of the work is how we offer opportunity and transform the lives of the population in these challenged communities. We currently have 700 zones of special operation, but as indicated before, there is maybe 25 communities in need of this kind of activity, and we look forward to how we can expand into other areas. And in fact, features of the work of the zones will have to be extended to about 100 communities across the island, as indicated from the various surveys done by the Planning Institute of Jamaica. Critical to the success of the zones of special operation, of course, is equipping the residents with life skills, training and a sense of identity. It will lead them to live more productive lives after the zones are concluded. This is at the core of a social transformation that underpins the clear, hold, and build strategy. Madam Speaker, the intended outcomes and impact of the zones cannot be fully realized unless the investment and initiatives are sustained over the medium to long term. This must be accompanied by routine monitoring and rigorous evaluation, which we have set out to do to ensure that the lessons learned will inform the way forward. And the various monitoring activities of the government are in place. There is the Planning Institute, which constantly reviews this situation, along with the City Security Secretariat, reporting to the Citizens Business Council. The monitoring and evaluation is a crucial component of the administrative approach to social investment. We have introduced a comprehensive monitoring and evaluation learning framework to support and track the progress and transformation activities under the zones. This is being facilitated through the work of the City Security Secretariat and the City Security Business Group for the City Security Plan under Plan Secure Jamaica. Madam Speaker, the data that we have presented over time demonstrate that we are not operating in silos. Instead, we continue to ensure that a whole of government approach is practiced and the necessary accountability mechanisms have been established. The members who have experience in working in the zones can attest to the very broad extent of the work that reaches the community involving all the relevant ministries. And this is why we have had to maintain a limited number as the resources are put in place that they can, in fact, effectively intervene. Consequently, Madam Speaker, it is with the highest of assurance that in accordance with the requirements under the law, reform zones of special operations, special security and community development measures, Act 2017, we are seeking to further extend all 7 areas currently declared as zone of special operations, ZOSO, which will expire on the 21st of February 2023. Acting on the advice of the National Security Council, in accordance with the law reform, zones of special operations, special security and community development measures, Act, in accordance with Section 5 of the Act, which guides the Prime Minister and Council after consultation with the Joint Command may by order subject to affirmative resolution of the House of Representatives extend the period referred to in Section 4.3. The Mount Salem, Denham Town, August Town, Greenwich Town, Norwood, Parade Gardens, and Savamar zones of special operations, special security, and community development measures to be extended for a further period of 60 days. Madam Speaker, the ministry papers are laid. I'll refer to a few of them briefly, outlining what has taken place in the various communities across the island. I will not occupy your time with all the details, but as I said, the ministry papers were laid today. The zone continues to transition along the clear hold and build spectrum with positive results with respect to crime reduction. Mount Salem and Denham Town will continue in the build phase, while Greenwich Town, August Town, Norwood, Parade Gardens, and Savamar will continue in the hold phase for this period of extension. According to the statistical data provided by the JCF, as at January 27, 2023, for the period prior to and during the declaration of the respective zones of special operations, all areas under the zones recorded reduction in all major crimes, including murder. Madam Speaker, the ministry papers highlighting the activities with respect to the community building industry strategy have been laid in the House for review. And while we can still, we're not claiming victory, and Madam Speaker, we're claiming progress, and we still have areas where work has to be done, especially in reducing the recruitment of gangsters. Right? Some of the more recent communities, which I might call newer communities, maybe informal or urban decay, I think once we get to the build phase, you find a significant reduction. But the work of the soft services, which is education, training, parenting, etc., is an ongoing process. And in fact, those are areas we have to keep pulling the organization and institutions into place because they are used to working in their own track. And the professionals themselves, while we are pulling them, are demonstrating a professional difficulty in just collaborating effectively. The government recognizes this, and through the Business Council, we are promoting far greater cohesiveness and cohesion. And I think some activities in the compensation pack will address the issue of social workers, which is a big challenge as we have to expand the social work services. And we are also having a significant challenge, Madam Speaker, in finding clinical psychologists for the psychosocial service required in these areas. So it is not a failure to try or even to agree to that. We have seek to recruit a number, but I would like to report to the House, Madam Speaker, that only this week we graduated some 30 psychiatric aides in one part of the island, and we intend to extend this across the area. That these are established community workers being trained in kind of early identification of psychosocial problems so we can refer them to the appropriate professionals. I'd like to highlight one or two of the areas. Madam Speaker, you'll recall that the first ZOSO was declared in Mount Salem in September 2017. The zone is currently in the build phase. All planned activities remain on target with over 95% of the developments in the advanced state of completion. There are no significant challenges currently, and the Mount Salem zone is at the apex of its overall development, and I think what we'll have to ensure is we can maintain the activities. The Mount Salem is at the apex of its overall development, and what we have to assure the population is to maintain a level of soft services in education, training, and the general services that reach the community, because it's still a working class community. Titling, etc., being done. We expect not only to raise the physical quality of life, but as I said, to maintain a level of peace, safety, and entire social ecosystem in that community. With regard to the next step, the government's significant investment in this zone has transformed the space, and as such, only a few legacy activities remain under active implementation. Denham Town is at the build phase of the strategy, with over $450 million invested to date. Given the advanced state development states of Denham Town Zone, activities are largely aligned to completing activities towards sustainable development of the community. It has a few legacy activities that are outstanding, which remain the focus of the Social Intervention Committee. The overall work plan remains on track, and Social Intervention Committee will continue to monitor and provide updates. There needs to be still major work on what we call the soft services, which is to ensure we provide the training and the opportunities and effective diversion of our younger members of the population from entering into gangs in the zone. Not only in the zone, but neighboring communities around this area of the southern belt of the corporate area. The Greenwich Town Zone is also in the southern belt. It's at an advanced stage of development with just over $150 million spent. It's a relatively small zone to date, and among the completed interventions is some road rehabilitation, water improvement, zinc fence substitution, human development and livelihood interventions, including summer school and skills training, benefiting over 80 youth members. The fisherman has offered, my MP, sent me, I'll come to look for him, I assure you. Right? That was a very good intervention, I must say, and we need to do more of that. Rehabilitation of the center and the primary school, entrepreneurial support for business in the community, so where some 18 entrepreneurs were given additional capital, provision of civil documentation, such as birth certificates, to over 300 residents. In August Town, significant work has been completed, but there remains a list of planned projects to support the community that are at various stages of development. Some $200 million has been spent, and given the need for extensive infrastructure development in August Town, a number of initiatives will be coming on stream to further support the build-out of the community. These include infrastructure improvement to rehabilitate and construct some 2.7 kilometers of roadway, enterprise development projects supporting over 25 micro-enterprise, solid waste management program, school rehabilitation of the Hope Valley Experimental and August Town primary schools, and skills training. August Town, Madam Speaker, is one of those communities, like I have one in my constituency, which has a surfeit of interventions. I think what we are doing in terms of physical infrastructure will have to be monitored and collaborate with other activities to see if, in fact, we can effect genuine transformation and behavior change in this community. It is right beside the university, as we are aware, and my friends on that side are fully aware. August Town has had a lot of activities, and we have to assess some of what we're doing to see if we are doing what is right, because they have had significant intervention, both capital now and human intervention over many years of different people. Sometimes I think we take August Town and a couple of the communities that we constantly have university people studying almost like guinea pigs, and we need to move out into a new approach. And certainly the Social Intervention Committee in August Town will examine a number of the activities and look at what we may need to do differently to ensure that we can move the community to another level and reduce the level of continuous violence in the area. The pace of activities is slow during the most recent extension in Norwood, one of the most recent declared zone, attributed to the end of the year, Christmas season, and the coming months, of course, end of the COVID period, but now those is undergoing significant build-out operation. They are at advanced stage of planning. So a number of enterprise development support grants have been granted. Solid waste management includes employment of environmental wardens from the community, and they have certainly shown quick adaptation. The Social Investment Committee is working. United Nations Development Program reducing traffic in small land project has been in the area, having community meetings. Jamaica's 60th Community Beautification project was identified there in the parish. Summer camps for youth and children have worked very well. Training and capacity building for the Norwood CDC continues, but indeed it requires significant further development in terms of both the soft services and infrastructure. Some $300 million approved projects are to be implemented in the community dealing primarily with water, infrastructure, and a few roadways. These investments are projected to be implemented in 12 to 24 months. The Parade Gardens area is still at the pre-development phase, with activities largely focused on identifying community needs for prioritization. The zone had not yet transitioned to the build phase, though in fact they have had significant reduction in criminal violence in that area. And the private sector is also working in and around the area in a their Project STAR. The zone has not yet transitioned to the build phase, hence the development planning process, which is being led by the Social Intervention Committee, remains focused on the formulation and identification of fiscal space to support the build-out once the zone goes into the build phase. In the interim, a number of short-term human development interventions have taken place. Civic documentation, such as birth certificates, community cleanup initiatives, community service fairs, road improvement along the main artery in the community. Similar to Parade Gardens, the Savlamar zone remains in the pre-development phase. The zone has not yet transitioned to the build phase. These include, however, some too, like Parade Gardens, a number of small human intervention projects have been completed, cleanup activities, operation certificate, again, civic registration, and development of an assessment baseline of the committee through the PIOJ implemented consultancy. This I like to repeat. We are asked the PIOJ to do some baseline social demographic studies, because in the CSS monitoring and evaluation, one of the absent features of social intervention over the years has been the accurate baseline studies as what exactly exists and is happening in the community in terms of social demographic data. The PIOJ is now dealing with both Savlamar and Norwood, and I think a third community, which I did not mention here, in terms of identifying putting on simple, easy to read and analyze data what's existing in the community in terms of employment, age group, the challenge they face, and therefore when we work, at what stage we can say we have in fact moved from A to B in the end. And there will be continuous monitoring of the activities that the social intervention activities, literacy, numeracy, existing of gangs, skill sets available, etc. So that is referred to here in Savlamar, and that's being done in Savlamar. I'm sure Norwood and the other communities. The policy is to extend this to all of the areas and ultimately to all the challenged communities, so that all activities, yes, including New Haven, to ensure that we can measure the impact of the investment in a real way and make changes in real time. If it's not working, then we should know that we can shift and put our resources not elsewhere but in a different way in the communities. I said I like to refer to Augustown and Flanker, which has had pretty much any conceivable proposal that has been made by any of the social workers have been attempted in these communities at some stage. In the past, we have had to make some newer, we've had to take some new direction, and we have seen signs of work both in Augustown, where I said the Social Intervention Committee looked at new ways, and we have done some things. While it's not part of the zone, but it's one of the challenge communities in Flanker, which has made some difference. Sometimes they can be investment heavy, but some things are not necessarily investment heavy. Data confirm that zones are contributing to a reduction of risk factors, increasing the capacity and competencies of their residents, and improving the future prospect of the beneficiaries. Madam Speaker, the zones of special operations have demonstrated their utility in improving the overall social welfare and safety of the residents of these challenged communities. To stop now would be premature. We must therefore continue so that the safety and security of these residents can be truly and fully realized, and in fact, not looking so much at stopping, but at expanding to reach the many communities that we view as in need of this kind of intervention. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Madam Speaker, I want to thank the Minister for his presentation, updating us on the efforts that are being made in the, I think you said it's 7 now, is it? 7 zones of special operations, and the plans to expand that number to 20 or 25, I think, and the recognition that there may be 100 communities that need these types of interventions going forward. I agree that it's very important that baseline demographic data for these communities be established so that one can measure progress when one is investing resources to try and uplift these communities, which is absolutely critical to transforming them to safe spaces for the residents where Jamaicans can pursue their life and their dreams without fear of exposure to intense levels of violence. Two things which struck me, Minister. You didn't make any mention of the legislation to amend the ZOSO Act that we have now. We went through a process of review. A joint select committee reviewed the Act, which was a provision in the Act requiring review. I think it was within 3 years. That review has been done and completed a long time now. And one of the things that were to be changed in the Act was the frequency with which one has to bring the matter here for extensions. I mean, some of these zones have been in effect now for well over 5 years, but every 60 days, the minister has to come here to seek approval of orders extending the zones for a further 60 days. Given that the strategy in these communities involving the use of this legislation is a long-term strategy, I think we need to modify those provisions quickly so that we're not spending so much time, precious parliamentary time, dealing with these renewals or rollovers of these ZOSO orders. But there are other provisions in the bill that is to come to strengthen the legislation in light of the experience that we've had with it over the past nearly 6 years. So it really ought to be a priority, given that this piece of legislation, the ZOSO legislation, is one of the important innovations that have come into effect over the last 6 years. And so I'm really seeking an update as to when the bill to amend the ZOSO legislation will come, because it's overdue, and I've been asking about it for some time. The other point I wanted to raise, Minister, concerns the tactics, the tactics employed by the security forces in the zones. There is a perception that essentially there are sedentary checkpoints across the zones where, police and soldiers sit under a tent for many hours, well, on an ongoing basis, really. But there isn't really sufficient attention being paid to what may be going on in fairly close proximity to those checkpoints. And so you have flare-ups of intense violence, even in a community which has been under a zone for over 5 years. I mean, we've been hearing just recently the reports in Denham town of serious violence, murders being committed, people being shot, and so on. And I get complaints, and neighbor, I have the same problem. Neighbor, I have the same problem. I have the same problem, but I don't have a ZOSO. I don't have a ZOSO where I am. I don't have 5 years of 5 years of public resources being poured into the community to uplift the community. So I'm expecting better results in Denham town. And because it's near to my constituency, what happens there impacts my constituency. People do traverse from Denham town and come into parts of my constituency. People in Denham town reach out to me. In fact, recently have reached out to me, and I'm more than happy to work with their elected representative to try and help to sort out whatever issues there may be. But my concern is in relation to the tactics being deployed. Why do we not have more patrols, patrols on an ongoing basis so that the people see the security...
Just a minute, members, the leader of the opposition is on his feet. Can I ask you not to... There are more than one person. Please, can we discontinue the crosstalk and allow?
Yeah. So, thank you, Madam Speaker. I'm just asking why we do not have a variation of the strategy to have more mobility in the communities on the part of the security forces, rather having them immobilized at checkpoints for hours on end. Many of them are on their phones, no doubt, cramped with boredom because nothing is happening right there. But there are issues around in close proximity. They need to be mobile. They need to move around the communities and be seen so that there can be less, their activities or their sedentary lack of activities is less predictable. And, whether they can be supported by cameras, CCTV cameras, Jamaica Eye, can we see the rollout of those in these communities to be a further disincentive to the criminals? What about the use of drones to monitor what is happening, especially at times when there's a flare? It might not be all the time, because when things are quiet, it's not necessary. But when there's a descent into an episode which is going to result in reprisals and so on, unfortunately, what tactics can be brought to kind of keep the peace and calm in those communities? I think that the security tactics that are being employed are inadequate. And it kind of brings the zones into disrepute when you see a situation where a community that has had hundreds of millions of dollars expended on it, on social improvements, social transformation, way beyond what is available to other communities which are in similar situations, and yet still violence continues to be a problem there. One wonders, is this really working? And we want it to work. So I'm just questioning whether the security aspects of it couldn't be fine-tuned to make them more effective. So those are my two suggestions, Minister. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, as Member of Parliament for St. Andrews Southwestern, where the Greenwich Town ZOSO fall, I wanted to place on record that when we look at some of the things that have been done, that there have been a significant improvement to life in the community and for the individuals who are beneficiaries, whether it is of the Enterprise Development Program, the summer camp, the civil documentation, the establishment of the, certainly the fishing beach. And as you know, I am proud to say that one of the fishermen that received benefits under the program actually did as he had promised and came back and gave fish to schools, not just in, to schools, not just in Southwest St. Andrews, but elsewhere, as he had promised, caught fish and brought it back, and so on. And that's the kind of thing we want to be able to see, that persons who are helped come back and in turn, they turn around and help. So I want to say that, and I want to say that in those areas, it's working. But can I also say, Minister, and I have been using every opportunity I have to make a couple of points. A simple thing, street lights. Yeah? You can't have a zone, a ZOSO, and there is darkness at night. Even the police themselves have to make sure that they leave before dark falls to protect themselves, because there is no light on the road. Yeah? It is an issue, and it is something that needs to be attended to. I happen to know that the Kingston and St. Andrew Municipal Corporation did an audit, and to date we have not seen or heard as to what is the follow-up from that, and what is being done as it relates to streetlights. And it is not as if streetlights were not there; they are not functioning. And I believe that that is basic, and it is something that we need to deal with. Huh? No, these are a long time they're not there. They have been talking about it for a while. The other thing, Minister, I noticed that you did mention the pipe laying that took place, which, yes, it is true, pipes were laid. But, Minister, today, as we speak, because not only to make sure we tick a box that it has been laid, but we have to make sure that individuals are getting water. As we speak, there are individuals, large sections of the Greenwich Town community that just don't have water. To make it worse, No, we'll come into that. Relax yourself now. To make it worse, because it's important to make it worse, individuals in this community have to go across the road, up the road to get water. Even though some of those areas might also have their own ZOSO. I would hate to tell you, but it is true, so I have to tell you, that individuals have attempted to go into neighboring communities to get water and were chased out, right? They were threatened that if they come back up there, they will not leave alive, right, for a little water. It is true that community members on the ground are dealing with it, those of us as leaders are dealing with it, but it should not be. And I believe that these are basic issues that can be dealt with, shouldn't cost that much money in terms of doing it. The pipelines are there, the lights are there. I am sure that street lights are being paid for and these are non-functional. So I'm concerned about that, Minister. Minister, the last time I came and I spoke and you made some notes around this and I've seen no change. I could not go back to the constituency without raising it today. And since I want to be able to go back, I want to make sure I place it on record. East Avenue. East Avenue traffic was diverted, turned into one way from we started all of the work in Portia Simpson Miller Square. That work has been completed. Most of the other diversions, they have been removed. We had the pipe laying along Spanish Town Road, all of that. That has been done. And up to today, there are citizens, residents, who have been locked into their communities by this road that they use to come in and out of the community, which is now one way north from Marcus Garvey Drive to Spanish Town Road. Maxfield. Absolutely, and this is when you leave Maxfield, it's down the bottom. East Avenue is down the bottom. It is a serious concern. I believe that what is hurtful is that individuals have been patient. They have not mounted the demonstrations that they would have wanted to mount. They have not made a scene. Yeah? They have not done any of those things, but their concerns still go unheard and unattended. I believe that more has to be done because it is, in fact, a serious issue. Then finally, just some very minor things. Minister, when you look at the report, just to make sure that what is in the report is consistent. Yeah? So if you say that for the provision of civil documentation, birth certificate, etc., is that it is for 300 residents, it's for over 300 residents, or it's for 260 residents. Yes? So between the table and the narrative, the numbers are not always consistent, and I believe it does a disservice to the report itself when that is not so.
Minister, want to conclude?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Just quickly comment before I ask for the House's assent to continue all seven. One, the issues raised by the member from, two members from parts of St. Andrews, South St. Andrews in particular. The security force leadership have, in fact, sought to make some changes to their deployment and to be more, to use the term, more dynamic. In fact, you note, I think at one stage they did pull back some of the checkpoints in parade gardens, and there was a picture of somebody starting to use a vending area because they did not move the tent. But there is an agreement that they have to be more dynamic in the area. All the checkpoints will not be removed, but we seek to have more activity in and around the area, because one of the failure to have such activity was that you find that there might be a quiet in the exact zone and just around it, all kinds of things happening. So security chiefs are very aware, and we are moving to improve that and expand the level of dynamic activity emerging from the area. Of course, that will ensure that they have the mobility and the acquired equipment and so forth, and uniforms and just some non-lethal activity, weaponry as well. So, I have one of those a zone in my area, and after 3 months, it's a kind of snowed, and there was a general movement of the threats in the air. They moved out. The source of their kind of activity is different from the corporate area. Most of them are in advanced credit fraud, so they have money. They just moved out. Rent houses, went elsewhere. Some of them had actually acquired property. And therefore, there was absolute quiet in the community. And the security men basically started complaining they had nothing to do. So we're able to reduce the number of the checkpoints and ensure that there's dynamic activity around. But it's one of the challenges we face. As we expand the numbers, it will become easier because the required security will have the authority to move more positively in apprehending those who are giving problems in the areas and to monitor the areas involved. But currently with 7, as I said, where the resources exist, they tend to move to neighboring community. The basic services, we have made some contact on that. The member from Southwest St. Andrew, which represents the Greenwich area. I want to follow up. We have an early social intervention committee, and I'm going to read all this again. I will do some further checks with the East Avenue State. I did make a note of it last time, and NAA has to move a bit more serious in dealing with it. It is a problem that should be dealt with, and in dealing with these issues in the community, we have to move quickly on the low-hanging fruits and reassure the population that our interest is not just transitory, but we are seeking to have permanent change. Thank you for your comments, members. I know ask. The legislation. It has gone through. I think it is back with us at the minister. We have sent it to CPC, and they have sent back to us, and I think it's now with AG and the minister tied up. It came back to us in late December. I hope to get it here. I'm as anxious as you to stop having these 60-day coming to Parliament on the same issues. Furthermore, as they are medium-term, it's a medium-term solution, and when you do a 6-monthly and maybe have a detailed annual report, we're in a better position to evaluate and also take some of the data and look at them in a very concrete way, and look at some of the practices to see if we need to make changes, and if we're intervening in other areas, what needs to be done and so forth. So we'll push hard to get it out. Legislation, as you're aware, can be a bit tedious, but we're getting there. And I said it has, in fact, come back with the amendments. And I hope by the next time we come to report, we should have the legislation here. I'll see to that. Thank you very much. Madam Speaker, I now seek the support of my colleagues to extend all 7 zones of special operations as laid out in the resolutions tabled this afternoon at 31st.
Members, the question before the House is that the resolutions, notice of which the Minister gave earlier, be approved. Those in favour? Aye. Those against? The ayes have it.
Madam Speaker, the Minister of Finance is here, and in keeping with my request for the leave of the House to allow for the motion to be put and to be truncated pending the arrival of the Minister, I now invite you, Madam Speaker, to ask the Minister of Finance to complete the motion as presented. May it please you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you to the Leader of the House for, in my absence, starting on the motion. As is customary with the tabling of a supplementary estimate, I just provide a 1-page narration for easy consumption of the documents. Madam Speaker, today I table the third supplementary estimates for the fiscal year 2022-23. And the third supplementary estimates provide for an additional expenditure of $24.5 billion, which increases the planned expenditure for the fiscal year to $998.2 billion. The additional expenditure, Madam Speaker, is primarily to facilitate payments under the compensation restructure, which accounts for $23.7 billion of the supplementary amount. Contributing to this increased requirement are a combination of factors, including adjustments to the initial compensation restructure proposal following discussions with unions and bargaining groups, provision of a higher percentage of the third-year target in year one, and the impact of overtime hours not accounted for in the estimate. Madam Speaker, this additional expenditure is being financed by projected increases in revenue. Now, Madam Speaker, it's important to note that the amount for wages and salaries in the third supplementary estimates represent what Jamaica can afford at this time. Madam Speaker, the third supplementary estimates have wages and salaries at approximately 11.4% of GDP, and this represents a meaningful adjustment in aggregate from what it was before. Madam Speaker, we cannot go down on a path of having wages and salaries crowd out critical investments in human capital development and in social and physical infrastructure. It was, if you go from memory, it was pre-COVID, we got on to about 9.2, but comparing like for like, you'd have to adjust for the fact that a number of allowances were in programs. If you adjusted for that, you'd be comparing 11.4 with about 10 or thereabouts. But you can't say a percentage of GDP and do that in terms of dollars because it's a different base. Right? Madam Speaker, expenditure on recurrent programs is slated to increase by a net amount of $2.7 billion. Contributing to this net increase are allocations of $1.8 billion as a one-off payment to traveling officers in relation to fiscal year 21-22. As you know, traveling is discontinued going forward, and we agreed with the unions as a one-off payment in this fiscal year as a final sort of traveling payment from the government. There's a $1.6 billion in subvention to the University Hospital of the West Indies to assist them with their compensation payments, and $300 million to supplement the increase to existing government pensioners. And some of the increase has been covered by reallocations, and those will be detailed in the book. Interest payments are estimated to increase by $2 billion, comprised of $1.8 billion on the external side and $200 million on the domestic side, and these primarily reflect interest and exchange rate changes. CapEx, Madam Speaker, declines by $2.3 billion, and this is due to the inability of 4 projects to spend the allocated amount before the fiscal year comes to an end. $1.1 billion has been reallocated to the Southern Coastal Highway Improvement Project, which absorbs some of the under-expenditure in other capital projects. As I mentioned earlier, very importantly, Madam Speaker, this is not a matter of expenditure being outlaid without the revenue to support it. This additional expenditure is being financed by an expected improvement of $25.4 billion on the revenue side, primarily from tax revenue, which is expected to increase by $28 billion, arising from a higher growth estimate, as well as taxes from additional wages. The grant inflows are also programmed to increase by $1.1 billion, Madam Speaker, while, very importantly, certain non-tax items of revenue, including a bauxite levy, are programmed to decline as against what was projected in the second supplementary estimates. Madam Speaker, these conclude my sort of remarks on the tabling of the third supplementary estimates, and I'll have more to say during the Standing Finance Committee and during my presentation on Thursday. Before moving the resolution, Madam Speaker, I know the opposition spokesperson may have a few words to say.
Madam Speaker, the opposition at the outset of the public sector compensation review, we have indicated our support of the efforts of the government to simplify the pay structure and to bring some order to what was an unwieldy pay structure. However, we have been dissatisfied with how the process has been conducted. As we speak right now, Madam Speaker, there are some critical agencies under the Ministry of Finance, Customs and TAJ, where workers are extremely restive, where workers are contemplating strike action because of the dissatisfaction, not just with the offer, but with the process. And by the process, I mean legitimate concerns that have been raised by workers have not been responded to, have not been dealt with in a timely way so that they feel that their concerns are being addressed. TAJ and Customs. I wanted to ask the Minister whether the $1.8 billion one-off payment for traveling officers reflects a settlement of a previous commitment that the government would have made prior to the compensation review. That's first. Secondly, Madam Speaker, the contract workers who, and I don't know the exact amount within the public service, continue to be excluded from retroactive pay that all other public sector workers will benefit from, which will be effective April 1. I want to ask the Minister whether the Ministry has finalized, concluded that that would be so, or whether there's going to be any variation to ensure that there's equity for contract workers vis-a-vis what we may call permanent employees. And I say that within the context of the majority of contract workers in the public sector are contract workers not by their own doing. They are there because it's the only mode of employment that was offered to them. So, for example, if you take the doctors, and that represents about 80%, they are hired on contract by the regional health authorities. They work alongside a colleague who may be permanent, doing exactly the same thing, but they are being treated in a differential manner. The third area that I want to ask the Minister on, for those categories or groups of workers for whom you cannot conclude negotiations by March 31st, how do you plan to treat with their wage settlements in the next financial year? You have said prior in the public domain that you don't have the fiscal space to carry over outstanding wage settlements. So I want to know how you plan to treat with that. And then finally, the two big groups that are still outstanding, the teachers and the police. And from my information, and again, I would ask you to update us, we don't seem to be close to concluding successful negotiations with either of those groups. I know the teachers are going to vote, I believe, this weekend on the wage offer, but the discussions with the police seem some way off. I don't think I need to explain to anybody here the importance of those two groups, particularly the police in the fight against crime, particularly for them to feel valued, and for them to be motivated to go out there and do the work that they need to do. So I would ask the Minister if he could respond to those. And finally, the reduction in capex on the 4 projects, could you indicate which of the 4, which 4 projects have not been able to spend the allocation in this fiscal year?
Madam Speaker, I have one question to just add. Just a clarification I'm seeking, Minister. You say that the additional expenditure is being financed by an expected improvement of $25.4 billion on the revenue side, primarily from tax revenue, which is expected to increase by $28 billion. Is that $28 billion over what? In other words, when we were last having a discussion on this issue, I think revenues were ahead this fiscal year of what had originally been in the revenue estimates for this fiscal year by some $60 billion at that time. So could you just clarify what this $28 billion relates to? Thank you.
One question, Minister. Minister, my understanding is that the matter of the concession has not yet been there has not been an announced resolution of that issue. Am I correct in that? If I'm correct, if I'm correct, that there's been no announced resolution of the concession issue, then I just heard you mention that the traveling allowance has been discontinued. Is that a prelude to a decision and announcement on the concession arrangement?
Minister, just if you permit me, Mr. Speaker, with relation to the compensation review, I know that the member from St. Andrews Southeastern spoke about the teachers who are going to be making a decision about the offer that is before them. But there still seems to be a lot of misunderstanding or uncertainty around some of the structuring in terms of, again, it is whether, let's say, for example, the positions that you take up in school in terms of extra responsibility and not being able to get compensation for that. I'm wondering if you have considered whether or not some of how it is structured will lead to a disincentive in terms of the roles, the non-teaching roles that teachers take up, which is important for building administrative skills and leadership skills within our schools. I think that is kind of important that I'd like to ask as well. You don't understand? Very simple. Let us say there are some concerns around the level of remuneration, for example, remuneration for whether it is grade teachers, senior teachers, who take on additional responsibilities in school, which are not teaching responsibilities. If there's no compensation for that, then there's a disincentive for them to do that, to accept to do that. And so what that means is that, and that is an important part of how schools are run in terms of building their administrative capacity and leadership capacity. And what are you thinking? Are you thinking to resolve that in any way? The final question is simply, the government is moving to deal with contract workers as it relates to the security guards who are employed through third party. But they are not the only category of workers that need consideration that would also be affected by the ruling of Justice Vats. Is there any consideration of those other categories of workers?
Well, we might as well have just moved the debate right here and pass the third supplementary right here today. That would help me a lot, actually. Could skip the proceedings tomorrow. Right. But I'll do my best to oblige with the permission of the chair of the speaker, and I might have to be reminded of some of the questions because they were voluminous in number. But let's go. Let's go. I was expecting one or two, so I wasn't writing, but I realized no, there were about 15. All right. So, first, Madam Speaker, the government has engaged in a historic restructuring of public sector compensation that is long overdue and that previous governments have not done. We have, the can has been kicked down the road, and we have demonstrated the courage to actually get this done. And in getting it done, Mr. Speaker, we have reduced a lot of the inequities in public sector compensation and ensured that persons who perform similar roles across the public sector are compensated similarly. Now, the process in doing so across 110,000 workers in the public service, across 140 public bodies, and scores of ministries, departments, and agencies is a complex one. And it's a complex one because, by definition, the procedures and practices across this multiplicity of ministries, departments, and agencies, which are too many to number, over, if you were to count them all, over 250 of them, the practices are all different. And as a result of that, Mr. Speaker, it is necessary to meet with every single ministry, department, and agency. You can't just make one speech somewhere and it applies to everybody. Now, as a natural consequence of the fact that of limitation in time and in the resources that are dealing with this, meaning in terms of the human resources responsible for the operationalizing of this project, it takes time to meet everyone. And understandably, those who are in the queue, frustration can build. Let me just say that in respect of one of the questions that was raised, and just the other thing to bear in mind, Mr. Speaker, is that these engagements are not solid engagements that you meet a bargaining group or representatives one time. For these 200 that I'm talking about, we're talking about meeting them more than once, 3, 4, 5 times. With respect to the Customs Agency and the Tax Office, they've been meeting with the Ministry and meeting with TIU. There have been several meetings. There remains some amount of unease with what so far has been discussed. And today I sent direct communication to every member of staff at TAJ and every member of staff at the Jamaica Customs Agency that I will personally make myself available to meet with them as a group next week with a view of resolving all that remains outstanding with respect to this process. This is not a case where there have not been meetings. There have been meetings with the Ministry of Finance and with the permanent bureaucracy that is there. Given that they've reached this position, it requires me to now get involved, and that is exactly what I will do, and that has already been communicated to all members of staff at the Jamaica Customs Agency and at TAJ. With respect, Madam Speaker, Mr. Speaker, to I think that, one of the other questions was about traveling officers and the $1.8 billion that is here. Prior to the restructuring of compensation, a number of persons who work in the public service received an allowance for traveling. The compensation philosophy that is enshrined in the new compensation structure is one where a person is compensated for the job that they carry out. As a result, traveling has been absorbed. In the absorption of that traveling, however, the unions represented from their perspective that there was an amount that they should have gotten, some kind of, their position was that they were due an increase in the traveling amount for a prior period. That was their kind of view. We had a conversation around it, and we came a couple of months ago to an agreed position that persons who were in receipt of traveling would receive a top-up on that traveling amount that comes to an end, or that came to an end effective April 1st or March 31st of 2022, or April 1st as the case may be. So that's what that $1.8 billion represents. I believe there was another question on, no, give me another one. All right. I've made it a point, Madam Speaker, and I want to repeat it, and I'm happy for the opportunity to do so, that the amounts involved in the restructure of compensation, and remember, we're able to do this in the aftermath of a recovery from COVID-19 because and only because our economy has recovered to pre-COVID levels. Other countries in the Caribbean region have not increased wages since 2018. Okay? Now, the amounts involved in the restructuring are sizable. You have seen here that this supplementary estimate involves an increase in compensation of $20-something billion. Mr. Speaker, $23 billion. And on the second supplementary estimates, the increases were, I believe, $30 billion or thereabouts. We're talking about big numbers. If those numbers that were provided for in the budget this year are not spent, then it is not possible to carry those amounts of expenditure into the next fiscal year. And I think that from our prior experience, we've seen it before, where what we call back pay is paid over a number of years, simply because the space doesn't exist for it to be accommodated. And that is why it is very important that we not only reach agreement in this fiscal year, but that we pay the amounts out that have been provided for. Now, it is not my practice, and I don't believe it is best practice either, to comment publicly on discussions that are underway. And I'd ask the opposition member to observe that practice as well. It involves a number of people, and let the process play out. I have every confidence in the people of Jamaica. With respect to contract workers, Mr. Speaker, let me say that the challenge of having contract employment in the government of Jamaica is a problem that is at least 3 decades in making. And you know what, Mr. Speaker? This government is going to solve that problem. This is not a problem of our making. This is a problem that you have to go back to the 90s and the 2000s and the 2010s and so forth, where it's a legacy problem, which I'm going to get into more detail at the right time, that comes from practices that we have had in the past. And the numbers of persons involved are in the thousands. It's not a simple situation or problem. What we are engaged in now is a restructuring of compensation, where compensation arrangements, which are legal arrangements, we are through a consultative and mutually agreed process, we are changing the legal arrangements of compensation in the public service. It is a fact that persons working in the public service today, maybe even in similar departments, have different legal and contractual arrangements. This is not a salary increase. I want to make that clear. In a salary increase, what would happen is we would just, it's a salary increase. The legal arrangements are not changing. What we're proposing to do here is to change the underlying legal arrangements between the government and the employee. We're doing so with respect to the permanent establishment with an effective date of April 1st, 2022. And, Mr. Speaker, this government is going to take on the intractable problem of having persons in the public service on evergreen contracts. Fixed-term contracts are not a bad idea in themselves, but fixed-term contracts are not applicable in all situations. And where we have an egregious problem in the public service that has been built up over decades are hard-working Jamaicans who are in evergreen contract employment that keeps on being renewed and they're not made permanent. We, Mr. Speaker, are going to fix that, not with an increase. We're going to fix that on a on a contractual, legal basis. Now, in doing that, Mr. Speaker, if we wanted to simply perpetuate the existing arrangement, we would do what was done in the past, or what has been done in the past, over the past 30 years, which is you have an increase for the permanent establishment, and you just give the same thing in the contract, but you leave the underlying arrangements unchanged. What we are saying, Mr. Speaker, is that is unsatisfactory, that is not up to par, not up to standard, and we are going to address it on a fundamental basis. So what it requires, I'm not trying to one-upmanship or political point scoring on this, it's a serious... Bring it on, bring it on. Come on, bring it on. What? All right. I'm enjoying it. Come on, bring it on. Right, so it's a serious problem. It's a serious problem, right? And so what we have to do, what we're proposing to do is that those contractual arrangements, and we can't do all at one time. We have to do it, obviously, deal with this public body and then this one and then this department and this department. But the basic idea is that those contractual arrangements will come to an end at a particular point, and they'll be replaced with permanent employment. Now, there are many in the public service for whom contractual arrangements come with gratuities that are paid at the end of their contract. What would happen when it's brought to an end? The prorated amounts would be paid, and we would enter into a new contractual arrangement which would mirror whatever their grade level or qualification is. Now, we cannot... That is the idea, but that is the idea. Some people, I want to tell you though, that it is not something that everyone will find convenient, as much as we are all in unity that we want to get this done, okay? Because there's a certain flexibility in these contractual arrangements, and maybe one of the reasons why they have lasted for so long. But it's a measure that we have to make with another companion measure. I want you to understand the gravity of it, that we have to, one of the reasons why this situation has evolved over the decades to be the problem that it is today is that ministries, departments, and agencies have engaged in the very unworthy practice of hiring persons without the requisite approval. Now, we're not going to make this change only for it to happen again. So the companion measure, it would be terminating contracts according to the contractual terms. Where gratuities are required, those are paid. And then persons are employed on a permanent basis where this is applicable and advisable in the public service. But it has to be accompanied by an amendment in our regime that allows for sanctions to be levied against persons who employ people in the public service who commit taxpayer dollars without the requisite approvals and not in accordance with Jamaica's laws and regulations. So that is the comprehensive reform to contract labor that we plan to implement, and at a later stage, I plan to say more about it. So that's the answer to that part of your question. With respect to the question on the revenues, the increase in revenues that are being projected with the tabling of these supplementaries is an increase over the second supplementary estimates. Based on the results that we have had for December and what we're seeing for January, those projections are made on that basis. To the end of the fiscal year, yeah. So it's on top of... Correct. And that is what I'm trying to say in my earlier remark is that where we are now, we have listened, we have changed, we have added, and adjusted the levels of compensation. And where we are now is what the country can afford. At 11.4% of GDP, we run the risk of crowding out necessary investments in human capital development and in our social and physical infrastructure. With respect to the question on the concession, the regime on motor vehicle concessions, which I've communicated in various fora, maybe not in this chamber, but in various fora over the last few months, that regime remains unchanged. With respect to the question that was asked, there will be some tidying up that we'll have to do to ensure that it remains unchanged, and we'll have opportunity to discuss that. In relation to the education, the question that you asked, I know that there is a task force that is set up to reform how we deliver education in the country. And some of the questions that you pose are policy questions, even as much as they're compensation questions. They're questions of education policy about how best it is to deliver those services that you say are being commingled with the delivery of education services. Oh, yeah. Wait, you have to leave something for Thursday.
I'm sorry, just for clarity, Minister.
Okay.
Minister, just for clarity. I am not sure I understand it as being a matter of policy. What I was really talking about is that I suspect that the anomalies occur because of how you have done the restructuring and the new categories, yeah, and the bands, and where you place them. No, man, I just want to say that I don't think it is really a matter of policy. If it is that you'd like to respond about it later, I'm good, but I don't want to leave it there. Yeah, because you weren't listening? Yeah, no, that's fine, I saw. I'm saying, Minister, that I believe that the anomalies appear because of how the different posts have been restructured, and therefore I don't think that it is solely a matter of policy. If it is that you'd like to respond to that question later, I can well understand, but I wouldn't want to leave it as a matter of policy. Okay, and then just again, continuing for clarity, because in your run-up, I got the impression, I don't know if I was mistaken, that part of what you were saying is that these issues have been there over the years and so intractable that how dare you ask me those questions at this time. No, I'm seeking clarification, Minister.
I can see that you're digging, and you're digging, but you're not going to find anything today. No, let me take the opportunity to assure you that I am ensuring that the public who are watching these proceedings understand the origins of the problems that we're trying to address. If there isn't an understanding of the origination of these problems, nor of the duration of them, then the solutions and the strategies towards the solutions won't be understood as well. So it's in the spirit of aiding public understanding that I am highlighting the facts that the issue of contract work or persons being employed on evergreen contracts in the public sector is one of decades. It has been around for at least 30 years. Could be longer. Could be longer. And it is something that we're going to sort out. And I know that you will support us in doing that. Yeah? Yeah. The question on... It's big in the Ministry of Health. It's very big in the Ministry of Health.
Minister, it is very big, that particular practice in the Ministry of Health. And in speaking to some of the young doctors recently who received letters, I believe, from the Permanent Secretary outlining some of the details that you have presented, many of them are not clear on whether or not they will have a post or whether or not once they give up the contracts, they will not have the gratuities that would be accorded with the post. So a lot of them right now are a little bit confused as to how they should proceed and the decisions that they should take. And you would understand that these are young doctors who may not have had a post, but they're not clear. So perhaps in your speaking and with whatever information that you could give, if they are listening, maybe you could give some clarity on how they could proceed moving forward.
So just on that point, I find it very effective to communicate through their representatives. And just last week, when was it? Was it Thursday? We had another meeting with their representatives, and a lot of the clarified and answered a number of questions. I don't think there should be any confusion about that at this stage. But just to satisfy you, that the idea is that persons who are on contract today and providing a service, who are that contract would come to an end by mutual agreement. Whatever gratuities are due would be paid, and they would be rehired in a permanent post. Okay? There's a lot of work to get that done, and a collaboration between the Ministry of Finance and the Ministry of Health. It's not all in the Ministry of Finance, but that is the policy intent, the policy objective, and that is what we're working towards achieving. With respect to the question on the capital projects, the ones that are, we don't see the amounts that have been allocated will be spent by the fiscal year. There's a Jamaica Disaster Vulnerability Reduction Project, the Electronic Land Titling Project, the NIDS project, and there are certain aspects of the modernization of the public sector project that won't be, oh, sorry, no, take that one out. That's been replaced by a different one. The fourth is we have a contingency provision in the PIMS pipeline for new projects that come on that are approved during the year. And there's an amount in there as well that amount is 1.5 billion. So that's the bulk of it, really. That constitutes the reduction in amount for capital expenditure. So, Madam Speaker, I ask that the resolution be approved. Oh, so which one? So, Madam Speaker, I ask that I now move. Oh, the bottom part. Madam Speaker, I now ask that the resolution is passed and the supplementary be referred to the PAC, which I believe will meet tomorrow. All right, so to meet tomorrow, Wednesday at 10 a.m. Thank you very much. And I thank the members of PAC for making themselves available for that meeting tomorrow. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Members, the question before the House is that the motion brought by the Minister be approved. Those in favour? Those against? The ayes have it. Motion is approved.
Madam Speaker, I beg to move for the recommittal of the item statements by ministers to allow the Minister of Mining and Transport to make a statement. May it please you, Madam Speaker.
Members, the question before the House is that we return to the item statements by ministers. And those in favour? Those against? The ayes have it. Minister Shaw. Minister, do you have copies of your statement for?
Yes, Madam Speaker. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Luton.
As this Honourable House is aware, the Road Traffic Act 2018 and the Road Traffic Regulations of 2022 will be brought into force tomorrow, February 1, 2023. As we approach this milestone, we must all be aware of the range of matters addressed by the RTA 2018 and the RTR 2022 and some of the significant changes that are expected. Significant work has been put in by many dedicated persons to have this act in place to address the all-important goal of having our roads operate safely and responsibly. The loss of lives and level of injuries that results from collisions occasioned by improper road use, unsafe driver and passenger habits, and use of vehicles that are not roadworthy have had tremendous negative impact on our nation. This act seeks to address the challenges faced and move this country into a new road culture. Madam Speaker, heightened awareness is already having a positive impact on driver behavior. Crash report for January of this year shows a 44% reduction in road deaths compared to the same period last year. Allow me to outline some of the key changes that are expected to directly impact the public. As it relates to cellular phone use, drivers will be restricted to hands-free use while driving. Where vehicles are not equipped for full hand-free operation, the driver must use Bluetooth earpieces. Texting while driving is strictly prohibited. Texting while driving is strictly prohibited. Changes to driver's license processes include the classification of driver's licenses as Class A, Class B, and Class C. Evidence that the road code test has been passed. A medical proof of identity and address, in addition to the fee, will be required in order to obtain a learner's permit, formerly a provisional driver's license. In order to get a driver's license, Class A or B, driving skills, yard and road tests will be required. For a Class C license, commercial vehicle mechanical knowledge, yard and road test, and a more comprehensive medical will be required. Provision has been made for remote detection of offenses. That is, tickets may be served for offenses detected by cameras, and the owner of the vehicle will be held liable, but the offense will not attract demerit points. The regulatory framework is set out in the regulations and will permit deployment of this mode of operation as soon as the requisite infrastructure and the communication mechanisms are established. And I should say, Madam Speaker, that what we're talking about here is happening in developed countries in a regular way right now. There will be a joined-up ticket management system. The traffic ticket management system has been modified to incorporate changes in the processes in line with the RTA 2018. Communication with and access to the TTMS information is established for the various stakeholders, the TAJ, the courts, ITA, the JCF, so that the existing gaps that cause deficiencies in the enforcement
process are addressed. The speed limit regime is also being modified. A review of existing speed limit boundaries has been undertaken, and new boundaries that reflect the growth of communities and developed areas are included in the 12th schedule to the regulations. New speed limit classifications are added, with 65 km/h zones now being put in place where warranted, and a reduced 30 km/h limit in school safety zones as defined in the 12th schedule. Embedded in the regulations are details of the rules of the road, which are now only set out in the road code. Examples are the operational rules at priority, stop control, and give-way junctions. Left turn on red light will now be permitted where the sign is so erected. And legal descriptions of pedestrian crossing locations are set out. Whereas the Island Traffic Authority now operates as a department of government under the Ministry of Transport and Mining, the Act now establishes it as a statutory body, and the organizational structure is in the process of being approved. This entity will carry out several functions beyond the current ones. It will assume the high-level responsibility for transport management, certification of driving instructors, and traffic road safety statistics. The RTA 2018 sets out the thresholds of accumulated demerit points, which will result in suspension of a driver's license. The ITA is empowered to issue notices to carry out the suspension and execute the requirements under the RTA. Licenses may be suspended for other reasons in accordance with the process set out in the Act. The Road Traffic Appeal Tribunal will come into existence on February 1 with 7 members and will afford aggrieved motorists an avenue to appeal decisions of the ITA. The members of the tribunal have been identified and approval granted for their appointment. Motor vehicle owners and holders of driver's licenses will have an obligation to provide updated contact information to the ITA. In addition to the physical address, email address and telephone numbers will be required so that contact can be made readily in the event that a notice is to be served on the person for any reason under the Act. Notices may be traffic tickets, notices of suspension, or directives to bring vehicles for inspection. With regard to the expungement of demerit points, all persons who were assigned demerit points on their driver's license prior to February 1 will have their points expunged to begin the new enforcement regime with a clean slate. Persons who have not cleared their matters will still be required to attend court and address the tickets that are outstanding. There will now be increased penalties for traffic offenses, as well as additional offenses arising from the provisions in the new Act. Motorcycle drivers are limited to carrying one passenger, driving on one wheel. What we call wheelie is prohibited, and all motorcycles must be sold with a helmet. A motorcycle learner must be accompanied by a licensed driver on another motorcycle within 6 meters and must not carry a pillion at any time or operate for commercial purposes. Madam Speaker, as is expected, the transition will require a period of conversion with changes to the documents used and produced and the required adjustments in road infrastructure. Therefore, the aspects that require a phased implementation will be addressed. As we transition to operating under the new legislative regime, arrangements and interim legislative provisions have been made to preserve the validity of the current while we move into the future. Some of the transition matters are mapping of existing driver's licenses to the new classes. Although the requirements to obtain a Class C commercial license will be different from the current requirements for a general license, existing licenses will be treated as though a motorcycle license is Class A, private is Class B, and general is Class C. A person's existing license will continue to be valid to drive the types of vehicles recorded on the back of the license, and the license renewed during the transition period may not reflect any significant change in what is printed on the license. Allowance for current learner drivers to test under the old regime. New holders of provisional licenses will not be able to apply for a driver's license for a period of 6 months. There will be an exemption to the 6-month requirement before being tested for a driver's license for those who got provisional licenses under the RTA 1938 after August 1, 2022. Existing traffic signs to remain valid. Traffic signs that have been erected over the years with designs that vary from those now incorporated in the RTR 2022 will continue to be valid and to have the effect as per the earlier regulations and be enforceable accordingly. Changes in vehicle classification, especially motorcycles. Vehicles continue to be classified in similar manner to the earlier legislation, except for a broadening of the definition of motorcycles. Where the classification of a vehicle is impacted by this change, the change will take place at the next fitness certification. Efforts will be made to contact owners of such vehicles so that they can be made aware and understand any implications. Time to allow driving instructors to meet certification requirements. Driving instructors and driving schools will have to be certified and licensed by the ITA. The effective date of this requirement is proposed to be January 1, 2024. which will allow for a reasonable time to allow the instructors to undergo an approved training program. Development of the National Vehicle Register. The National Vehicle Register will now include all vehicles, whether operated on public roads or not. However, vehicles used off-road will not need to be registered unless the owner wishes to get a title. It will take time to gather information on these vehicles to fully populate the register, but information will now be put in the register upon importation. Delegation of functions by the ITA. The ITA, established under the RTA 2018, is a statutory body that is not yet operational as an organization. The functions to be carried out are delegated to the bodies that currently have responsibility, such as the National Works Agency, Tax Administration of Jamaica, the parent ministry, and when the entity is set up, it will take over the requisite functions. Recording and management of demonstration plates by dealers. It will take approximately 6 months before the change process for applying, issuing, and keeping records of demonstration plates can take full effect. As dealers will need time to adjust their processes so that the new registers and reporting systems can be populated and brought up to date. The first quarterly return will become due at the end of March. Implementation of new speed limit zones. Speed limit zones have been revised and new zones identified, but it will take some time to get the new signs in place to demarcate the zones so that the changes are clearly communicated to motorists and enforcement officers. It is anticipated that the new signs will all be in place by the beginning of next year. Denial of service for outstanding tickets. Persons with outstanding tickets will be denied services such as renewal of their driver's license. Implementation of this measure will not come into effect immediately, but should become effective by April 1, 2023. Use of application forms. Where the differences between the existing forms and the new forms are not significant, the TAJ and ITA will continue to use the existing physical stock until these are depleted, as the old forms are valid for use under the new legislation in keeping with the Interpretation Act. Madam Speaker, with road traffic regulations and management being a multi-sectoral responsibility, the Ministry of Transport and Mining has been working closely with various entities and agencies to identify and resolve issues that could create challenges in a successful implementation of the RTA 2018. These stakeholders include the Ministry of National Security, Ministry of Justice, Office of the Parliamentary Council, Attorney General's Chambers, Legal Reform Department, Tax Administration of Jamaica, among others. Madam Speaker, it has been a long journey to get the Road Traffic Act 2018 to the point of implementation for the planned February 1, 2023. There has been much criticism about the time it has taken to first get the RTA 2018 passed by Parliament, and then further to get the accompanying regulations presented before the Parliament for approval. We are now well on the way to bring the remainder of the RTA 2018 into force, along with the accompanying regulations, and much work has been undertaken to make the necessary adjustments to the processes and systems within and across implementing agencies. We ask for the patience and the cooperation of the public as the new rules are brought into operation, and welcome feedback and discussion on how we can all work together for a better and safer road traffic environment. I want to assure every member of the public to remain calm. Demerit points will be expunged for persons who attend and make arrangements with the courts for the payment of their outstanding tickets up to today, January 31st. Madam Speaker, the public can make contact with the Ministry of Transport and Mining and/or the Island Traffic Authority at 876-754-1700 should they have further queries. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker.
Madam Speaker, I hope that this is not the public education campaign that the administration has embarked on. If it is, it would be a shame if this is the public education campaign. You know, and I'm tired of you coming to the house and think you can shout down everybody. So why don't you keep quiet? Yeah, man, you make up too much noise in the house, man. Madam Speaker, Madam Speaker, you mean Desmond don't have nothing sensitive to say? So yeah, I agree with you. Madam Speaker, this Road Traffic Act was first tabled in November of 2015, some 7 years ago. Retabled in November of 2017, passed in 2018. It took us about 4 years to pass the regulations, which was passed in 2022. And we're now coming to the point of enforcement of this act coming into being. It's a better late than never, Madam Speaker. But while we are celebrating the coming into being the act come February 1, Madam Speaker, again, I will express my disappointment that such major changes that have been made to the Road Traffic Act and the regulations that are far-reaching, even by the words of the Minister, that a public education campaign has not been put in place, one that was promised to be put in place.
that come February 1.
Madam Speaker, on a point of order.
Sit down, please.
Madam Speaker, my friend is misleading the House. If the member is leading the House, yes, that is true. Madam Speaker, the Ministry of Transport and Mining has been doing public education consistently over the last 4 years in relation to the Road Traffic Act 2018. There have been seminars with bike riders kept in Westmoreland. There have been other training sessions kept with taxi drivers. Even the launch of an online training portal for taxi drivers was done. I'm not finished, Madam Speaker. There is also public education being consistently done by the police, who have been spending a lot of time and money on social media educating the public on the clauses of the Road Traffic Act. The central government and through the Office of the Prime Minister and various ministers have been all over the media on numerous radio stations educating the public on the clauses and the implications. We've had a national address by the Minister of National Security. We've had several statements stretching back to 2018 by the ministers responsible for transport and mining. So for the member to stand here today and mislead us that there has been no public education is wrong.
Madam Speaker, Madam Speaker, Madam Speaker, I have seen better campaigns, public education campaigns, gone behind NIDS, the Hope Project, even BOJ and inflation. I have seen public education campaign that more have been spent on. But if it is that the Minister of Information and the government feels that they have done enough, we on this side don't think that enough public education has been done in sensitizing the country and road users on the new Road Traffic Act. Madam Speaker,
I hear you, member, but the statement for which the point the minister rose was you said the public education system had not been done. So,
well, Madam Speaker, Madam Speaker.
So,
Madam Speaker,
allow me to finish. Come, please, members. Two wrongs don't make a right. Please. The comment, I heard you and you said your side does not think it is enough, but the comment to which the minister rose was the fact that you said that there was no public education that was being done.
Well, Madam Speaker, as a member of the House and the spokesperson for transport, if it is that the minister feels that sitting in a classroom with a handful of motorcycle riders is a public education campaign, Madam Speaker,
member, please,
noted.
Please.
Noted, Madam Speaker. I'm awaiting them to be quiet.
Members, the crosstalk is having members. The crosstalk is from both sides, and we have students sitting in the gallery. And a point was made. And please, I'm asking you, let us.
Madam Speaker, we too on this side, we are happy to see the 44% reduction in road deaths compared to the same period last year. But I would say, Madam Speaker, it is not the positive impact on the driver behavior in the sense of the new Road Traffic Act that is coming into being. But we would want to join the Minister, Madam Speaker, in saying to road users, slow down, take time, because every life is one that impacts another and families. So, but to say that the success of the new Road Traffic Act and its regulations, Madam Speaker, will come down to enforcement. Because, as I've said on numerous occasions, what is in the new Road Traffic Act? Most of it was already in law before. And we saw the increase in road fatalities. We saw disorder on the roads. So the new Road Traffic Act in itself is not the solution by itself in just passing and coming into being, but be complemented with enforcement as we move along, Madam Speaker. We have had some time, Madam Speaker, to prepare road users for what is to come. As the Minister mentioned, that there are changes dealing with speed limits. It would have been good to see that when we are now implementing the coming February 1, that in those areas, the school zones where the speed limit has been reduced, that those speed signs would have been installed. It's a little bit disappointing that funding wasn't given for those installation of those signs, because it is well and good to say that it will be communicated that the signs are not there. But once persons do break the law, unless they are ticketed, again they are going to have to pay, even though that there is an appeals tribunal put in place. But it just shows of how it is that we can pass laws, but then have implementation which end up a bit chaka-chaka, Madam Speaker. So, Madam Speaker,
Members, I'm going to ask you, all of us, to remember, I'm asking all of us to remember that we have students sitting in the gallery, and the Prime Minister is also sitting in the House and expects us to represent at the highest possible standard. Please.
Madam Speaker, we should be having a seamless implementation of the new Road Traffic Act. But as it is, we are where we are right now, and hoping that there is that coordination between the Island Traffic Authority, the police, especially to do with the speed limits, the adjustment of speed limits, the different furnishings that ought to be put in place, that are changes that have been made within the Road Traffic Act and its regulations. Madam Speaker, again, in regards to the expungement and the reprieve, Madam Speaker, again, you know, we made the suggestion in the House last week, Madam Speaker, of an extension of the date, not for everyone, but that the new Road Traffic Act could come into effect come February 1. But those persons who went to court and got a date outside of the 31st of January that those persons would have been considered, that they can benefit from the reprieve. Madam Speaker, it shows how insensitive we can get sometimes and uncaring, because even after accepting that the courts in itself would not have been able to manage the throughput, the influx of persons that would attend upon it, that the administration still decided not to consider those persons. Madam Speaker, the act itself, the bill itself came. I am sure that if we do a check right now, that the bill has not yet been gazetted. So we're basically come to the end of the reprieve when the bill has not yet been fully gazetted and come into force. Madam Speaker, it is not too late that the Prime Minister can consider and the Cabinet can consider those persons who have been to court, even though fault of theirs are not taking care of their tickets, but a reprieve was offered. And because of the courts not being capable of managing, have been given dates, I understand, up to May. Madam Speaker, through you to the Prime Minister, those persons should be considered and the reprieve extended to those. And they are facilitated. Madam Speaker, we on this side will give all the support to the new Road Traffic Act and its regulations. The fines in the new Road Traffic Act, Madam Speaker, and that is why I keep on talking about public education, are much different from what obtained. If we feel that every Jamaican and road user listen to us in Parliament or listen to every statement by a minister, we make a sad mistake. But I hope that there is smooth implementation and that persons do utilize the time given to pay the tickets, that they pay it within the prescribed time. Because, Madam Speaker, the impression is being given out there that we on this side are encouraging persons that they don't have to pay their tickets and that they can just get away with it. We have to accept that the system has been broken, Madam Speaker. And a reprieve was given. And a system put in place that was just not adequate enough to deal with the demand. That is what we need to accept. So, Madam Speaker, we give support to the implementation date of February 1, but again, I ask the Prime Minister to reconsider those persons who went to the court and have gotten dates, that they be considered within the remit of the reprieve. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Madam Speaker, thank you very much.
Member was...
It's just a question I want to ask of the Minister, Madam Speaker. Spoke to one of the new provisions, which is left turn unread will now be permitted, where the sign is so erected. If we're going this route, Madam Speaker, and the Minister alluded to first world countries and other countries where electronic ticketing for infractions is allowed and done, why is it that you have now need to have left turn unread with a sign? Why do we not have wholesale left turn unread with a sign? I mean, without a sign, right? Because, you know, if you think about it, Madam Speaker, there is always, you will not be interfering with the movement if you turn on left at a stop sign. So, just to ask that particular question, Madam Speaker, as to why it does not allow for this. Thank you.
Madam Speaker, I served on the Joint Select Committee that considered the Road Traffic Act so many years ago. And I say that to make the point that the revision, the overall of the Road Traffic Act was one that enjoyed bipartisan input, contribution, and support. Of course, in all Joint Select Committee, there might be issues that one or two persons might not fully agree with. But in the whole, it represents a collaborative effort recognizing the problem that we face as a country. That said, Madam Speaker, we knew then that it would not be a perfect bill at the time, subsequently a perfect act, and one that will require ongoing review as situation changes. Indeed, I have no doubt about the support. As I said, they participated in it. But, Madam Speaker, as we go along, some more things become even more evident than at the time when you were contemplating the bill. My colleague from Central St. Mary alluded to one provision about the left turn in the Act. And, those of us who have been through many of these exercises know that you learn some more as you go along when more information becomes available to you. So I want to support to the observation by my colleague. But more specifically, Madam Speaker, that I would want the Minister to address the provision in the Act for electronic detection of breaches, well supported. However, there's a real problem that we have to be mindful of. There are certain sections of the country, especially in some of the urban areas, in Kingston, in Spanish Town, in Montego Bay, nobody not stopping at 2 o'clock in the morning and an electronic detection of an offense might very well be in place to tell ordinary Jamaicans, in light of the level of crime and violence in the country and some violent hotspots or areas which are clearly vulnerable, right? For us as a country, and I deliberately say as a country and not as a government, because I'm saying that we must collectively take ownership of this, to tell ordinary Jamaicans, and that we call some of the areas, but we know where those areas are, to tell a Jamaican that they must stop there at 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock a.m. to wait on a traffic light to change when the rest of the place have no traffic, is deserted, is a hard ask. Right? You calling him, I'm not calling any. Member Chuck knows where you're talking about. But seriously, Mr. Speaker, that's a hard living reality. And to tell the Jamaican that they must then take the ticket and go to court and make a point to the judge, to be honest with you, that is unfair. They have to get lawyer, incur expenses, and some Jamaicans are just not articulate enough or have the courage to go before a judge on their own without incurring legal expense to make their point. We as a country must be sensitive to these realities, and when we enact laws or seek to enforce laws, we are cognizant of these realities. So, Minister, he stepped away, but the Minister of National Security is here because it is his ministry that deals with the enforcement side of the breaches in the Road Traffic Act. So, Minister Chang, I'm putting it on your head. We have to work out something to deal with these realities. The second other concern I have, you see, I preface my comments by taking some ownership of it too, because I've served on the Joint Select Committee that considered the bill at the time. The second point, Mr. Speaker, is the violation for the sound from vehicles, whether cars or motorcycles, being above a certain decibel. Right? Again, we collectively supported that from the Joint Select Committee stage. I know that the full Parliament would be in support. Some of them is more than nuisance. Some of them are health hazard. The amount of noise that they make, especially in some of the residential communities throughout the country. And so the law must seek to protect ordinary citizens from these abuses. But there are some, especially motorcycles, I'm understanding, might be sold and new, brand new, that have this big noise decibel level. So my concern, Minister, is that where someone buys a motor vehicle, lawfully, legally, properly, all the rest of it, and it has decibel above the permissible level, I don't know if we can consider some transitional period for these to be modified to be in keeping with what the legal provisions are, to the extent that they existed before the law comes into effect. Because for a man who follow the law, buy the vehicle, but it is X amount above the decibel level, and then him commit a breach and have to pay the price, I don't think we want to consider that too fair. So I want to put that for consideration. Mr. Speaker, I am uncomfortable with law-abiding citizens, good-intentioned citizens, be made into criminals by the laws that we enact. So it's against that background I am inviting some consideration to mitigate those possibilities where they could likely occur. And lastly, Mr. Speaker, my friends on the other side jump on my colleague from Northwest Manchester when he mentioned about the public education program. The truth of the matter,
Madam Speaker, a point of order. Madam Speaker, we have to maintain the decorum of this House. Mr. Speaker, it is accepted that questions be asked after a statement by minister. It is also accepted that the spokesman on the other side be allowed a latitude to make a presentation thereafter. Members, let us be faithful to that standard that we have set ourselves. Ask questions and not make statements. May it please the Madam Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, I trust that my good friend, the leader of government business, right? My good friend, in and out of the House, is my good friend. That would not like a question to be posed without providing the proper context in which the question is being posed. And if I seem overindulgent, Mr. Speaker, it is only because of my anxiety to make sure that there's full context to the question that I'm posing to the member.
The minister is back. The minister is back. Minister, I have raised a question time and again about, and I want your assurance that this phase, the road traffic laws covers a range of issues. And while it is appropriate that we focus on the safety, road safety, and the conduct of drivers on the road, there's also the issue of the economic regulation. Minister, do you have a sense as to when attention will be turned to that aspect of the Road Traffic Act, the economic regulation? Because the road transport is not simply about just driving up and down and riding up and down. It's serious commercial business, the road and the transport system network, serious commercial business. Can you actually give us some assurance that the economic regulation or the economic aspects of road transport, economic regulation? You don't know. You clearly don't know. No, but there are economic regulation to the road. I can't make any statement, I'm told. but no, Minister. I've asked a question and I've been told previously that they will come after. But the road traffic laws, the economic the transport sector, right? The transport sector. There are logistic services that use it. There are issues around how the laws have been and the regulations have been put in place. Those in the Transport Ministry knows, the Permanent Secretary and those know, and you should ask them, what about the economic regulations affecting the transport, the Road Traffic Act? That aspect, there's an economic aspect to it that needs to be addressed. And I suggest you ask the technical people, they know and they understand, but the regulation need to reflect those economic concerns, okay? So please ask.
Just three very quick questions to ask the Minister. One is, on page 9, Minister, you say that all motorcycles must be sold with a helmet. And I was just wondering what exactly does that mean? If I bought a motorcycle, I had a helmet, disposed of that motorcycle, and I'm buying another motorcycle, but I've bought a special helmet because I like those kinds of stuff. I have to buy a helmet with it. I mean, yeah, no, because it says it must be bought with a helmet. So I just want to understand exactly what that means. That's one. I also wanted to know, Minister, whether or not any consideration was given to cultural practices. For example, where the motorcycle taxis have become a way of life, basically. What is intended there? You spoke about what they call it, public education. Has anything specifically been done, any discussion with those individuals who would be severely affected now, especially in terms of their livelihood? Yeah? And that's two. And just third, I'm not sure if you heard all of what the member from South St. Catherine said. What the question that he asked about individuals being either afraid or reluctant to stop in those areas where there are hotspots at certain hours and might then incur an infraction because you have the electronic detection and what is being done. I know that those are addressed in very simple ways in other jurisdictions. You know, you switch your light to flashing amber at certain hours of the night. So I want to know if those considerations are actually in train.
I just wanted to, no, well, I've sought leave from the Speaker to say something.
Just a moment. He means that the Speaker has given him permission. This matter is current. I have been very relaxed in the amount of time being given to each Speaker. It is something of importance in the country. And the member asked, and in keeping with, I think it's Standing Order 1782, I am allowing him. Because I think from all the comments that have been made from the opposition, it is important, and you are intent on us giving as much information as we can to the public. So unless you have changed your minds. So that is why I'm allowing them. So, it is a comment I've made because I have allowed topical to speak interest of educating the public.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I will not be long, but there were some very important comments raised or questions raised that I think should be addressed, and I think I'm in a position to. We do not diminish the importance of public education.
Minister,
Madam
you have asked
Speaker,
for permission to speak, address.
on a point of order, Madam Speaker, a point of order, Madam Speaker, a point of order. You've just referred to Section 17A2, which properly deals with questions and answers to questions. We are now dealing with a statement from the minister, and it is that minister who has to respond to questions arising. Now, you can give leave, Madam Speaker, for another minister to make a statement, but that will necessitate also the courtesy of a response from the opposition.
And I have no difficulty. The minister who is responding is the Minister of Education, who would information, who would have, and I have absolutely no difficulty in allowing a response if it is necessary. I am speaking so that Does the Minister of Transport require time to put his answers together to the various questions that have been asked? I'm not. Very well. Go ahead. If you are, go ahead, Minister.
Madam Speaker, I'd just like to point out is that the public education program, as was mentioned by the Minister of Information in the government, is a process that has been underway for some time and will continue and will be speeded up in the process. And because it covers across several ministries and departments, the rollout of it actually is being handled by the Minister of Information in the Prime Minister's office. But you can rest assured that where we are now, we have to step up the information activities to make sure that there's a smooth transition to the new system. I just want to also say that it's important to note that there will be a period of transition. Everything can happen tomorrow, okay? So, for instance, the point that you have made is something that we will have to be rolling out over a period of time. Absolutely, right? But I agree with you that it's absolutely necessary, right? Especially in a business-oriented and democratic society. It is something that we have to focus on in terms of the rollout and the information process that we use. I just want to also say that I take the point about the question of, well, we have the left turn unread, but I think that the issue of late night is something I'll have to discuss with the Minister of National Security, right, to see what kind of realistic approach could be taken to have, not to encourage lawlessness, right? But as you say, you could have flashing lights, you could have the light, on a particular thing. So when it's blinking, it means that if it is clear, you can go ahead. I've seen that in other countries. So that is something that can be examined by the Ministry of National Security. In terms of our motorcycles, right, and the need for helmets, that is something that we're not going to be easing up on it at all, right? But the Minister of National Security has indicated to me that the police has indicated that there will be a 90-day period, right, of working with the bikers to transition into the requirement, absolutely, the absolute requirement for helmets. And that's going to be done over a 3-month period. And in terms of public education, right, and the police will in fact be doing that, Madam Speaker. So I want to say to members of the opposition that all of the answers don't necessarily rest just among us, right? We can get help from you. We can get help from the general public, because guess what? All of us together want to build a safe road system and traffic system in our country. I also want to make a point that although we have indicated that the deadline is today, I want to make the point, and this is very important, that the fact that the people, the persons have sought to get a date from the court, and based on the activities of the courts over the next few months, there is actually a clause in the Road Traffic Act 2018, right? And I will read it to you. It says the issue, expiration, and expungement of demerit points, right? Those are actually responsibilities that directly involve the minister with responsibility. So that based on the fact that they have started the process from before the implementation date, those are things that can be looked at with the judge in terms of an appeal in the process. I want to make that point.
Which clause is that, sir?
Yes?
Which clause in the road traffic?
It is on page 85. It is under the section, the minister may make regulations generally for giving effect to this act without prejudice to the generality of the foregoing, may make regulations in respect to any of the following matters.
So you intend to make regulations?
That's right.
You're going to make special regulations for this?
Yes, well, precisely. But in this case, these would be regulations. These would be regulations that would be transitional. In other words, it is focusing on the transition from the present system to the new system, right? And if those people have come by today and they get the date in the court, that is the point that can be. It's in here. In the.
You need to make a regulation to do it. You need to make a regulation to do it.
House Leader.
Just on a point of clarification on that issue, if the minister could just indicate, does he intend to make a regulation under that provision to grant that relief to those persons who went to court today or before today? Just to clarify, since it's a provision he read from is a regulation-making provision. I just want to have that clarified.
I think the minister has spoken. Anything else will go on. House Leader.
Madam Speaker, Madam Speaker, the Prime Minister of Jamaica will now make a statement to the Honourable House.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you, members of the House. The government of Jamaica, and indeed the people of Jamaica, even with our own challenges and concerns, are deeply concerned about the humanitarian and security crisis being experienced by our Caribbean neighbor and sister nation, Haiti. The people of Haiti continue to have their human rights threatened by powerful gangs and militias which perpetrate heinous crimes, including killings, kidnappings, and acts of violence against women and children. These have escalated with the recent murders of policemen. Jamaica, through a joint CARICOM statement, strongly condemned the recent round of violence in Haiti. Today, I reiterate that condemnation and extend our condolences to the families of the fallen officers. Madam Speaker, nearly 5 million people face acute hunger across Haiti, and cases of cholera and cholera-related deaths continue to pose grave difficulties for their public health system. Indeed, Madam Speaker, there are several emergency-level crises now in Haiti. Thousands of Haitian children, especially those living in gang-affected areas, have yet to restart their school year, and there are increasing reports of minors being recruited to serve in gangs. We are extremely concerned for the people of Haiti and the multifaceted impact of this situation on their development. Against this unfortunate backdrop, Jamaica reaffirms its commitment to working with CARICOM and bilateral partners such as Canada, the United States of America, and the wider international community, including Latin America and African countries, towards achieving sustainable solutions for the situation in Haiti. Together with like-minded countries, we continue to believe that any solution must be driven by the will of the Haitian people, together with the collective support of the international community. In this regard, Jamaica took hope from the signing in December 2022 of the National Consensus for an Inclusive Transition and Transparent Elections, which identified a calendar for installing an elected government by February 2024. The consensus agreement has resulted in the establishment of a High Transitional Council to make nominations to Haiti's highest court and an appointed committee to review the Constitution. The developments over the past week, however, demonstrate that progress on the path towards restoration of democratic institutions and the rule of law remains highly fragile. Within CARICOM, and as a member of the group of lead heads on the issue of Haiti, Jamaica continues to collaborate on efforts to deliver on Haiti's request for international assistance. While internal deliberations within CARICOM remain ongoing, Jamaica restates our preparedness to support a united international effort in response to the persistent and deteriorating emergency in Haiti. We note with interest an initiative being contemplated within the OAS to strengthen the organization's response to the increasingly complex and challenging situation in Haiti. Jamaica will remain closely involved in efforts within this body to develop constructive approaches at the hemispheric level. Outside of this collective approach, however, from a bilateral perspective, Jamaica and Haiti are neighbors enjoying long-standing good relations and partnerships. We have long signaled, and here reiterate, our willingness to provide specific bilateral support, including in the areas of electoral reform and capacity building and logistics. The government of Jamaica also stands prepared to host our Haitian brothers and neighbors here in Kingston for constructive talks and negotiations between Haitian political leaders and civil society actors, should this be an agreed approach. In addition, Jamaica would be willing to participate in a multinational security assistance deployment to Haiti under the appropriate jurisdictional parameters to support a return to a reasonable level of stability and peace which would be necessary for any inclusive democratic process to take root. Both the JDF and the JCF have been alerted to this possible course of support, and they would have started to plan for such eventualities as part of their routine situational awareness and response readiness. It is our real hope that Haiti will soon overcome her challenges and embark on a path towards the restoration of stability, long-lasting peace, and sustainable development for her land and people, with the full backing of the international community. May it please you, Madam Speaker.
Madam Speaker, I thank the Prime Minister for his statement. There is no doubt that the situation in Haiti is of acute interest to Jamaica, given the proximity of Jamaica to the shores of Haiti. The history of Haiti is a proud history. They are the first country to abolish slavery in the Western Hemisphere, if not beyond. They successfully fought a war of independence against the odds and then struggled to be recognized as a nation, and in fact had to pay a huge sum of reparations to France as a condition of being recognized as a nation by France and the Western powers. And reparations for Haiti should be on the agenda of any discussion around moving Haiti forward. And I say that as part of the wider debate and the wider struggle for reparations. Clearly, it is in Jamaica's interest that Haiti be restored to a functional democratic system of governance, and that the security within Haiti and of its borders be put on a footing where criminal elements, organized and disorganized, do not hold sway. The thought of a further deterioration of the security situation in Haiti and the further empowerment of criminal gangs and criminal organizations in Haiti, and what that might mean for the potential impact of that on us here in Jamaica, given that there is already established the guns for drugs trade and other related nefarious activities of that nature, is an alarming prospect for us. Therefore, I would endorse Jamaica participating in any effort which is established in accordance with international law and with the concurrence of the Haitian people or the Haitian government representing the people, because it is in our interest to ensure that if and when the process of Haiti getting back on its feet towards an effective democratic system of governance begins, it must have the necessary support, both from a security standpoint, but also from the point of view of financial support and technical support, so that it has the very best chance of success. So, Prime Minister, within the parameters that you have outlined in your statement, we would endorse that. And we look forward to seeing Haiti get beyond the current situation which has been plaguing them with the assassination of their president and the general descent into what appears to be an almost anarchic situation in which criminals are holding sway. Our hearts go out to the Haitian people, and we know they're going through the hardest of times. And they have had so many struggles that they have had to overcome. But, you know, the dawn of a new day lies ahead, and Jamaica must play our part in helping the Haitian people achieve their destiny of greatness. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Madam Speaker, it's not intended to do any further business today. So on the motion of adjournment, and in keeping with my commitment to the opposition House leader to indicate what the dates and timetable would be for the restart of the new parliamentary year, I would like to advise the Honourable House that pursuant to the ceremonial opening of the Parliament on the 14th, Tuesday the 14th at 11 a.m. of February 2023, the Standing Finance Committee, or perhaps as is customary, the appropriation budget will be tabled on the 14th, and then it will go to the Auditor General for review for 2 weeks. And so on March 1st, the Standing Finance Committee will meet and continue its meeting through March 2nd. Hopefully we'll complete the deliberations in the 2 days. And we then open the budget debate on March 7th, when the Minister of Finance, in his traditional way, will open. And then on Thursday the 9th, the opposition spokesman on finance will speak. On Tuesday the 14th of March, the leader of the opposition will speak. On Thursday the 16th of March, the Prime Minister will speak. And the budget debate, the financial budget debate, will close on Tuesday, March 21st by the Minister of Finance. Madam Speaker, it is intended also for us to, as I indicate, do a reconfiguring of the chamber so as to revert to the order we had before, but more so to ensure for greater commodiousness for members within the chamber. We think that we are looking forward to a very vibrant new parliamentary year. And it is my hope that the tradition of promptness and starting the House on time and the example of discipline which this House has displayed in the past year will continue forever as we continue to do the will of the people in this hallowed chamber. May it please you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I now move that the House be adjourned until Tuesday, February 7th. Tuesday, February 7th. Oh, I beg your pardon. I'm sorry. Yeah, for Thursday, yes, Thursday. For Thursday, February 2nd, when the third estimate will be debated and passed. May it please you, Madam Speaker.
Members, the question before the House is that the House do adjourn until Thursday, the 2nd of February at 2 p.m., when the third estimates will be, supplementary estimates will be debated. Those in favor? Those against? The ayes have it. This honorable House is now adjourned.